All right, here's a quick pro tip if you plan on overseeding or establishing a new lawn this spring or fall. So if you plan on overseeding or just establishing a new lawn this spring or fall, I recommend you go out and buy some test pots, some flower pots, just like this. Cheap, expensive, whatever's you prefer. So the reason behind this is going to be our test pot or our control. Basically, what you're going to do, and make sure you do this in order, you got to make sure that whatever you're overseeding, you do the same thing to your flower pots the same day. That way your days and germination days are going to be in sync. So there's a couple reasons why I recommend doing this and why I've always done it. Other than the fact that I'm just kind of a nerd when it comes to grass seed and I like to see what they look like in person, or you just like testing out different grass seeds. But most importantly, this is going to tell you overall if the grass seed you just applied to your yard is going to germinate. If you water this for 2 to 3 weeks and you don't see any change whatsoever, you know that your grass seed is expired or it's no longer fertile. The second reason is it's much easier to watch the germination and overall progress in a very small controlled area like this as to looking out in a yard, which is a much broader area. And finally, what I like most is these little pots are portable. So if you have a grass type that prefers full sun or full shade or really dense shade or half sun, half shade, I could move these pots to different spots in my yard and see how they look and how they perform. So a couple recommendations if you do choose to do this, basically try to use the soil from your yard. Now this area right here is going to get overseeded and new grass seed this fall because the leaves, well, they did what they did. But you want to try to use a sample from your actual yard in the actual flower pot. Now, if you can't grab a sample from your yard, you could use potting soil, which works just as well too. But we want to use what we have. Once you got your little flower pot all filled up with soil, next, go ahead and apply the grass seed of your choice. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of a nerd. I like to test around and test different brands and different types of grass seed, but just use a grass seed of your choice and apply a thin layer, about 1/4 inch, to the very top of the soil. Make sure that this whole area is covered up, just like you would do in your yard. Now, if you're overseeding, you wouldn't have to cover as much, but if you're establishing a new lawn, go ahead and cover up that dirt completely, just like you would be doing in the yard. So once you have the grass seed applied to your flower pot, it's time to cover that seed. We got to protect it from the sun, birds, whatever. Basically, if it's not covered, it's not going to germinate very well or not at all. If the grass seed is exposed to the sun and not kept wet whatsoever, the chances of your germination percentages are going to go down. Now, there's a couple options that you could use. 9 times out of 10, I always use peat moss, but I want to duplicate the same scenario out there and here. And out there is very muddy, very dry. There's no grass whatsoever. We're going to use a field conditioner, which is pretty much granules of clay. It's going to help retain water really well until the grass seed germinates. Field conditioner also works really well, like I said, muddy spots, slopes, hills, or very heavy traffic. Hence the picture of the baseball field on there. So once you have your flower pots fully assembled, go ahead and pick the area that you're trying to repair and lay them as close to as possible to the area you're trying to repair come fall. Because remember, we want to duplicate the same scenario it's going to be in come fall. And another thing is, before I forget, this is very, very important. If you're using different types of grass brands or grass seeds or types, make sure you're labeling each flower pot. Especially if you're using different types of grass seed or brands, you're going to get lost, trust me. Make sure you label them. Finally, and most importantly, we got to keep these flower pots watered. They have to be moist and wet for at least 2 to 3 weeks, or until you see germination or anything start to sprout up. Then after that, about 2 or 3 weeks later, you could dial it back a little bit. Also, if you're using Kentucky bluegrass, I recommend you have some patience with the side of patience. Kentucky bluegrass likes to be shy, it takes a long time to germinate and well establish, but it should pull through. Also, it might be more convenient to use a watering can, fill it up once, instead of trying to use this long hose and drag it across the yard. So you might already be doing this. I know a lot of people that do this when it comes to grass seed and overseeding, but I wanted to show you guys that this is a tool, and like any kind of hand tool or power tool, it's going to make your job easier. And also, speaking from personal experience, back in the day when I was very young, got into lawn care, my first house way back when, I experienced a problem with grass seed that I bought from a big box store. It had no results whatsoever. So a friend told me to try this method, and sure enough, it never ever germinated. So that's another reason why. You want to make sure you buy and get what you pay for. And like always, guys, thanks for watching. I hope this helps.